We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard across the country from our flagship station in the nation's capital, WWRC, courtesy of Radio America. And I remain your host, Mark Angelides. Now, we're very fortunate to have with us a perennial guest on this show. I'm sure those of you who have listened before will recognize our national security correspondent, Mr. Dave Patterson. Thanks for coming in, Pentagon Dave.
Thank you, Mark. It's always a pleasure being with you.
Or the Hammer, as we call him in more colloquial circles. So, Dave, there's really so much to cover today. And I think the first thing is, at time of recording, news is quite fresh that Russian President Vladimir Putin has just co-opted another, I believe it's 160,000 conscripts from the 18 to 30 age range, which would seem like there's an escalation coming. But it also, to me, and you're the expert on these things, but to me, it also seems like he's preparing for the end game, and the end game not being we need to overrun the Ukrainian people, but the end game being to be in a position to have a solid peace treaty that benefits Russia more than it benefits Ukraine. Or have I got the analysis wrong?
No, I think that's right. I think when there are two real motivations here, I think, Mark, and one of them is filling out the ranks for those who have been lost in battle, and I think that's been substantial. And he's running out of people on the front lines. I mean, bringing in the North Koreans is a big clue. But also, to your point, to establish the forward edge of the battle area, as we used to say, and to solidify his position so he is in a better negotiating stance than he would have been otherwise.
Yeah, I really think that's the key to it, because there'll come a date very, very soon, I believe, and hope, where an agreement is reached, and it will be, this is where we negotiate from forward. But from now on, there's a ceasefire, and there's no rocket barrages, there's no active fighting on the battlefield. But to have that, one side or the other's got to say, we are clearly in control of this territory. It's not a disputed area in terms of, as you say, the battle lines. And by bringing in another 160,000 troops, that provides, you can put 10,000 here, you can reinforce 15,000 here, and that would kind of give credence to the idea that this is Russian occupied territory as of now. And that
you have to realize too, though, that it's okay. You call up 160,000. I mean, they're not instantly battle-hard soldiers, and in fact, if you put them in too soon, they'll become gone like the others. But I think too, Mark, that you have to realize that Trump is in a very, very good position.
Yeah,
and I think that he knows that, and he's I wouldn't say that he's a patient person. I mean, from what we've seen. And I think that
only with his grandchildren, apparently.
Yes, right. Well, we all have to do that.
Hit the ball. Maybe not that patient.
No. But so here he is. I mean, he knows that Putin is in less than ideal military and economic condition and a situation, so that, I mean, secondary tariffs, secondary economic sanctions on Putin would be devastating to him, because right now he's holding on to these strings of trade and commerce, and to take those away would be, I think, quite devastating to their economy. But at the same time, he also has a military problem, and it's evidenced by the calling up the 160,000 and going to North Korea for troops who you can see were not battle hardened in any way, because they're attrited very quickly, and so I think that Trump believes that he's in a good position, and also militarily, if you really irritate him, he will simply say, "Fine, we're all in," and that is not something Putin wants.
Yeah, it's not something anybody wants. really, because you never know where something like that is going to go from when you put it down in the ground. It's like for those familiar with it, it's Ian Malcolm from Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, explaining about what happens after an initial event. So you mentioned the North Korean. I think that's a very interesting point. So they brought in the North Koreans, and I don't think people realize this, although we do talk about North Korea as a deadly threat to the world because it's a pariah state, very much is. But the actual troops, what do they do other than war games amongst themselves? A little bit of patrolling along the border, taking pot shots at the south, and doing parades. They're parade soldiers, as far as I can tell, which is not conducive to being in a live battle situation. And then you have on Ukraine, they've also got a similar problem, haven't they? Because they've been toying with the idea of again expanding the conscription range. They've pretty much brought in everybody they can, and they're trying to get in help. Let's just use the word help there from outside forces. So those two parts where they're each struggling for soldiers to backfill, as it were. Those are similar situations. But when it comes to, as you point out, the economic strings that President Putin is currently trying to keep hold of, those could go very, very quickly. I mean, those could be cut in a day, and that would cause some what I believe is serious devastation to the Russian economy, even though it's on a wartime footing.
Well, the fact that it's on a wartime footing, it means that your products that the people would normally have in the grocery store are cut short in order to satisfy the wartime footing. But you also make a point about the North Koreans being a parade army, as it's proven to be. But there's also this fact that the Chinese are the very same thing. They have not had a field battle since probably Vietnam. And then, of course, you have the dust-ups along the China-India border, but those don't include regular troops. So you have armies that face the West that aren't battle-hardened, Russians being the exception now.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation for everybody. Now, you said about the economics, and we've discussed that, and that would be quite devastating. Now, militarily, what is the US looking to do short of going all in?
No, I think that we're now short of going all in. I mean, we have provided an extraordinary large amount of modern weaponry to the Ukrainians, and I think that they have used them, effectively, as they have all of the NATO contributions as well. And but at the same time, I mean, you don't have a massive attacks that could be mounted. You have Ukrainian attacks, which are isolated. There's not a really well-defined front like there would have been in World War I. They do have trench warfare, but they're isolated, and the attacks come in isolated areas in the Donbass and Luhansk areas. And so you don't have this massive use of force that would be brought to bear. I mean, if the Western nations really got irritated. And I don't think he wants that, because he can't afford a massive conventional warfare. I mean, he's barely hanging on, really. I mean, it may look like whenever they want to move, they can, but that's not necessarily the case. They move at great expense in life and equipment.
Yeah, so it's about the type of war fighting that's taking place. So from the Ukrainian side, they lost a large portion initially, and now everything that's happening now is it's what I think of as pinprick skirmishes in various places. So that they're trying to disrupt where the battle lines can be strongest for Russia. So they do a pinprick skirmish in one place, and so things move there. And so then they move to another area and do another pinprick skirmish, essentially trying to keep the battle line from forming solidly in one place. And only when there's a more weakened area can they push more forces forward. But as you rightly point out, they don't really have the the munitions, the materials, the people, or the plan, as far as I can tell, to recapture a significant portion of territory.
And they are resting on the meeting out of aid from the West. So they don't have this, this large inventory of weapons. They have a set number of weapons until they're replenished, and they're never quite sure whether they will be replenished, to the extent and the quantity that they have been in the past. And I think that's also why Zelensky now has realized that a ceasefire without conditions is in their best interest. The Black Sea ceasefire is sort of in flux, but that would be the first indication that there was some movement.
And we'll be keeping track of this mercurial pocket money style war as it goes on. Now we're going to be back with Dave after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.